We're used to seeing horror stories coming from the West, stories by and about Americans. But we know that the world doesn't end outside the borders of the United States, that it's full of people from many different countries, each with their own unique stories, and some of them are quite mysterious. In this video, we'll dive into the catalog of Anomalies we know Anomaly, the authors of the story about the Lovecraftian cult of the insect god, Mrohoi. Here, however, he has collected unrelated mystical stories from all corners of his fictional world. One by one, you will see photos that depict unidentified objects in a world full of mysteries, threats, and personal tragedies. And I have selected the most interesting ones, especially because behind some of them it is not difficult to find riddles from the world of the already real. This is a catalog of Anomalies, the international horror network. Social media has made us aware of many tragic stories, not only of the Samperini family. In one of the groups dedicated to strange family photos, a Bulgarian named Stanislav Stoyanov was noted, sharing one photo. After the death of his grandfather in 2014, he was sorting through what was left of him, finding a box of old film photos under the deceased's bed. Stanislav didn't notice anything unusual about them at first, just plain old photos, people, places, significant events for the family. However, one of them caught his attention and allowed us all to witness the amazing history of the Stoyanov family. The back of the photo contained a dry caption, "The 2nd of September, 1949, the last memory of my father." Hello everyone, I'd like to share a photograph of what I believe is my great-grandfather. I know the image might seem disturbing to some, but I find it fascinating to be able to tell the story behind it. It could be some kind of hoax. I know, I'm not completely sure about my sources, but there's enough evidence I've found that suggests a certain level of truth in this strange family relic. Stanislav's grandfather was a rather secretive man. He rarely talked about his past and only mentioned his father a few times, after moving with his new family to the capital. Little was also known because his grandfather came from a small Bulgarian village somewhere between Pernik and Sofia. Nothing usually comes out of those places. And these pictures got to his descendants only because grandfather's first girlfriend for a long time was a Czech woman who worked as a photographer. Stanislav decided to get to the truth. Traveling to the backwoods of Pernik, he found his distant relatives living, as it seemed, in the same house where his grandfather once grew up. As he continued his investigation, Stanislav learned that the photo did not belong to his grandfather, but to his great-grandfather. He had abandoned his life as a young man and devoted himself to his sick father, leaving him alone in his house. The photo seems horrifying now, but as Stanislav learned, such a thing was not an oddity for that time. In the first quarter of the 20th century, diseases and parasites then unknown to medicine were raging in many parts of Bulgaria, spreading from person to person, especially among low-paid laborers like Stanislav's great-grandfather's father. Working in a lead mine, he contracted a rare type of parasite that was common at that time. The fate of the patient was unenviable. Spreading through the victim's body, the parasite began to squeeze him dry and then eat him alive. The almost paralyzed miner became food for the huge cave worms growing out of him. The development of medicine made it possible to defeat this disease, making it unknown to modern man. No special records of it have survived, and the insignificant archives are clearly not particularly popular. Many miners of these years had more terrible and deadly diseases, but this photo remains, where Stanislav's great-grandfather, a dozen years before the birth of his son, who would move to Sofia and become grandfather to the narrator of our story, held on to his father to the last. Despite the cries of pain, despite his own life passing him by, he continued to nurse him, even when the worms devoured nearly half of his body. Even then, he took him out for a walk and took this photo, the last photo of his beloved father. There used to be a bizarre custom in Europe of the post-mortem, a photo of the deceased before the funeral, where he was dressed and posed as if he were still alive. Such an obsession to some extent, though suppressed by us, has survived. And you can constantly see news reports when the already dead body of a relative is left to lie in an apartment and gradually mummify. And you can never know if in a neighboring apartment, with quiet tenants, there is a dead person lying in the middle of it. In 2007, the previously unknown Samperini twins suddenly appeared on a small radio station in the province of San Juan, Argentina. As sudden as their popularity boom was, it ended just as quickly, and the brothers disappeared back into obscurity. The object of the hype was their family history, but not another scandal in the genre of soap opera, but a tragic and frightening case, which was captured on a video camera. The full recording was not known to the general public, but one frame from the tape attracted attention to the guys. The twins Vicenta and Paul had only a mother, Luciana Martinez. They knew little about their father. In Pt.2, he decided to start a family, and after marrying their mother, he began trying to conceive a child. Fernando was a family man and always dreamed of having a large family, so the failure to have children was weighing on him. He tried to look calm in the eyes of his wife, continued to work in hobby photography, but she knew that it was hard for him. Fortunately, after a year of failure, Luciana finally became pregnant and soon gave birth to twins. Fernando was beyond happy, but it was quickly over. A few months later, he briefly left his family for a vacation in Chile, and during a trip down the water, a malfunction occurred, costing the father of the family his life. For a long time, Luciana remained in her parents' home, and the little boys began life without their father. Time passed. Things were getting better. 15 years after his death, the brothers decided to go to his small homeland in the city of La Plata. The house where their father was born, grew up and married their mother was still standing in the same place, abandoned, but as if untouched by strangers. Entering it, the brothers began their search for memorabilia that could make up for the loss of their loved one. While shoveling through piles of old stuff, they accidentally came across a box of cassettes. They knew Fernando was into photography, but they had never heard from his mother that during those 2 fateful years, he had started to get into video cameras as well. After picking up the box of tapes, the young men headed home, but what they saw on them did not leave them satisfied. The records date back to 2019, when their father was particularly concerned about his inability to have children. Distressed by this, he imperceptibly fell into a morbid obsession with them, and began secretly in one of his offices to master something that replaced his son. Assembling an ugly doll, Fernando filled it with materials, parts of the frame and animal remains. Little by little he perfected his creation, trying to give it a realistic look, resembling a little boy, changing his clothes, grooming him, holding conversations. As the tape progressed, the boys noticed something even more disturbing. Fernando seemed to find himself unhealthily obsessed with his mannequin. His words, initially parenthetically gentle, took on an increasingly cruel tone, at times devolving into something intimate. The Samperini brothers refused to share more details or to see all the tapes through to the end, leaving many of the boxes untouched. They left their father's house for good and resolved never to remember any of it again. In 2011, the police detained local historian Anatoly Moskvin. In the apartment of the detainee, they found 26 growth dolls assembled over the mummified bodies of girls and teenagers. He had been digging up raw materials for the dolls from cemeteries for 10 years, gradually adding to his collection. After mummifying the bodies, he would complete them with doll and mannequin parts and then dress them in dresses or puffy clothes. Sometimes he built inside musical mechanisms or speakers so that his little neighbors could sing for him. The scientist justified his actions modestly with the desire to have a daughter. Now I'm going to show you a picture. Yes, you see what you see. The hollow frame of a destroyed submarine lying in the middle of the deep Siberian taiga. You might assume that it was left at the site of an abandoned town or some secret military facility where this model was designed, or that it was an overgrowth near a Navy port. But no, this is the deepest part of the Yamal forest, snow-covered almost all year long, and this ship should not be there. However, its history is quite curious. It all started with the space race. While the resources and talents of the two superpowers were being pushed to the limit where they could push progress as far as possible by showing their superiority in the symbol of a man leaving the planet, some thought that the race had gone wrong. Yevgeny Bazanov was a respected Soviet admiral who suggested that spaceflight represented less the greatness of man than the conquest of our own planet. He was partly right, for to this day we still know the surface of Mars better than our own space homeland. While people watched countries fly upwards, Bazanov's project was directed in the opposite direction, to the very bottom of the ocean, where it is physically impossible to get not only a man, but the same most developed at that time technology. Bazanov envisioned that such a challenge might be even more difficult than space travel. Joining forces with China's best physicists and engineers, Soviet researchers designed a compact submarine in which several people were to dive to the very bottom of the waters in the eastern Arctic. Project Limits -4 was launched, and its crew breathed fresh air for the last time. Here, at around 7 a.m., They were ready to dive to a record low depth, breaking the devastating pressure boundary, to reach and document sites that had remained untouched for thousands of years. Under the close supervision of Soviet commanders and American observers, the team began the descent. Diving deeper and deeper underwater, they took one boundary after another until they were not even past the depths they thought they had reached. A few men, in a small, pressure-bent tin can on all sides, found themselves in pitch darkness, in which no vessel was supposed to be able to dive. It is rather difficult to talk about further. Many data remained a mystery, and questions were never answered. Whatever happened when the submarine reached that fateful depth, it lost communication and was found after being destroyed deep in the Yamal forests. Speculations were made about the specific effects of critical pressure, about underwater gases and volcanoes. The funniest, of course, was also a hypothesis about something alive on the bottom of the Arctic, which did not like the excessive attention. The submarine still lies in the middle of the taiga, and its crew has never been found. The story is certainly a bad one, but there is interest in it. Of course, we also dived to greater depths. Back in the 60s, the American bathyscaphe Trieste reached the bottom of the Mariana Trench. And the history of the anomaly itself may be inspired by the fact that in 2020 the Russian vessel Vityaz D went down there for the first time. However, Vityaz, unlike all previous missions, including James Cameron's dive, was already uninhabited. The ship operated entirely on automation and plunged to the bottom by itself. Nevertheless, we must admit that until now the surface of most of the Earth, despite all the technical sophistication and satellites, remains a mystery to us, especially its ocean depths. Many of you must have heard this sound recorded somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, the so-called bloop. There has long been speculation as to whether it could be the roar of some giant underground creature, especially since the location of the sound was a location relatively close to the place where, according to the plot of Lovecraftian stories, the ancient Cthulhu slept. I, however, find the other sound, upswip, far more mesmerizing. As with bloop, its nature is summarized as the activity of backyard volcanoes or Arctic ice, but no definitive statements are made. After all, it really could be the peculiar singing of a large cluster of giant deep-sea squid, or something else that we small land primates, who so rarely dive to such bottoms, don't yet know about. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and share this video. Bye, everybody.